All right, let's dive in. Today we're going to talk about something that's absolutely fundamental to cloud networking. How do you securely connect your private applications to other AWS services? That's where AWS PrivateLink comes in. Think of it as your own private, secure tunnel right inside the cloud. Let's get into it. So you've done all the hard work, right? You've built this secure, private cloud environment for your applications. But when those apps need to reach out and talk to other services, is that connection, is that traffic really as private as you think it is? It's a question worth asking. Okay, so before we can really appreciate this solution, we've got to understand the problem we're trying to solve. And this whole story starts with the foundation of your private network in AWS, the VPC. Right, the Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC. The easiest way to think about this is as your own private fortress in the cloud. It's a completely isolated slice of the AWS network where you and only you make all the rules. And inside the walls of that fortress, everything's supposed to be safe and sound. Your applications, your databases, you set up all your security groups and network ACLs to keep them protected from the outside world. It's your secure bubble. But here's the rub. What happens when your application running safely inside that fortress needs to talk to a service like Amazon S3 or CloudWatch? I mean, these are essential AWS services, but they actually live outside your private VPC. So how do you build a secure bridge to them?
Well, traditionally, the main way to do this involves kind of cracking open the fortress gates just a little bit, and we call this the public endpoint path. So by default, if you want to reach an AWS service, your traffic has to get routed through an internet gateway or maybe a NAT gateway. This is basically the mechanism that gives your private resources a path to that service's public-facing address.
Now, here's the catch, and it's a big one. Even though this traffic is technically staying on the AWS global network, it's taking what you might call a scenic route. It has to pass through gateways that are designed for public internet traffic. And what does that mean? It means your security rules get way more complex, and your supposedly private traffic gets uncomfortably close to the public internet. Not ideal. So this really boils down to a fundamental choice. On one side, you have the public path. That's the old way, with more moving parts and way more security headaches. And on the other, you have the private link path, which is direct, simple, and a whole lot more secure. And that is where AWS PrivateLink enters the picture, offering a just fundamentally better way to connect your cloud resources. Think of PrivateLink like this. It allows you to create a completely private and secure connection, a virtual tunnel from your VPC directly to the AWS services you need. And the most important part? That tunnel and all the traffic inside it never, ever touches the public internet.
You know, the AWS documentation puts it perfectly. With PrivateLink, you connect to AWS services as if they were in your VPC. That's an incredibly powerful idea. It's like bringing the service right inside your own fortress walls, no internet gateway needed.
And the benefits here are just huge. Your network design gets so much cleaner, your security posture is way stronger because that data never leaves the AWS private network. And if you're dealing with strict compliance rules, things like HIPAA or PCI, this makes your life a whole lot easier.
Okay, so how does this all work? How is this magic possible? Let's pop the hood and take a look at the key component that makes this private tunnel a reality.
The secret sauce is something called a VPC Interface Endpoint. Now that sounds a little technical, but just think of it as a private doorway. It's basically a network interface with a private IP from your own network that you place directly inside your VPC's subnet. It becomes the entry point, the doorway, to the service you want to reach. Now here's where things get really clever. Your application code doesn't need to know anything about this new private doorway. It just continues to make requests to the same old familiar public DNS name of the service, like the standard one for CloudWatch. So naturally, the question every developer is asking right now is, wait a minute. If there's a new private endpoint, does that mean I have to go back and refactor all my code to use some new private address? And the answer, thankfully, is a resounding no. Absolutely not. And this is where the real magic happens. There's zero code changes required, and it's all thanks to a feature called Private DNS.
Here's how it works. When you enable Private DNS for your endpoint, AWS does something brilliant.
Inside your VPC, it essentially intercepts the DNS request for that public service name. But instead of resolving it to a public IP, it resolves it to the private IP address of that endpoint you created right inside your own subnet. So your application thinks it's talking to a public service, but its traffic is actually being routed through your secure private doorway. It's awesome.
Okay, so now you get how it works. But let's talk about doing this the right way, especially in a production environment. This is a crucial pro tip.
Look, if you only create your endpoint in a single availability zone, you've just built yourself a single point of failure. It's a classic mistake. If that one AZ has an issue, poof, your resources in other zones lose their connection to the service. Not good.
So the best practice for a resilient architecture is really simple. First, create endpoint network interfaces in at least 2 availability zones. 3 is even better. Then, make sure Private DNS is enabled. After that, your application just keeps accessing the service using its public name. And finally, AWS automatically takes care of the rest, routing traffic to a healthy endpoint. If one AZ goes down, traffic seamlessly fails over to the others.
So, to sum it all up, AWS PrivateLink is an incredibly powerful tool. It lets you simplify your network architecture, seriously enhance your security posture, and helps you build much more resilient, fault-tolerant applications. It's a win-win-win. By taking all that network complexity and those security worries off the table, you're free to focus on what really matters, building amazing things. So the only question left is, with all this newfound simplicity and security, what are you going to build next? Thanks for joining this explainer.